row to top up my part-time NHS
me get my private practice off the ground.
My career while still being present for my little daughter.
To make that leap into independent practice a little bit easier.
To widen my community.
Access a wider range of clients.
To explore private practice.
Support more families.
To develop an independent practice.
Connect with a community of therapists.
Be available for people who have been waiting.
To do the work that I love, but with the flexibility that I need.
Opportunities that I wouldn't otherwise have had as an NQP.
A way of working which could be really client-centred, but also more sustainable for my own well-being.
Hello and welcome everybody. Hope everyone is enjoying the final day of conference and finding the sessions and networking beneficial. Before we head into the penultimate keynote, can I remind you to please post questions in the question tab on the right hand side. Questions will remain visible after the session and can be answered by presenters and me, the chair, if we don't get to them within the session. Please use the chat function on the right side to share comments and feedback. And the question and answer and chat box are being monitored, so please be kind and respectful when sharing your thoughts. If you need any technical help throughout the conference, head to the Help Desk tab on the left and speak to one of the platform technicians for support. RCSLT related questions and queries can be directed to Tom or Francis via the RCSLT exhibitor page in the sponsor area. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Professor Beverly Harden. Beverly is Deputy Chief Allied Health Professions Officer for England and will be highlighting opportunities of the moment for allied health professionals. Over to you, Beverly.
Wonderful. Thank you, Helen. And hello, speech and language therapists. It's wonderful to be with you today. So thank you so much for the invitation. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes. Those of you who know me will know that maybe 20 minutes is optimistic, but I'm going to try. Otherwise, Helen will rugby tackle me off the screen. And then I want to have some time with you to talk about the things that are mattering to you at the moment, because at the moment, things are so tough out there. What we want to try and do is have an adult conversation about the opportunity rather than me just lecture at you for the next 47 minutes, which, however fascinating that may be, I'm sure we'd rather have a conversation about where things are. And just thinking that from a workforce training and education perspective, which is where my expertise and influence sits, those are the questions that I'm really keen to get under the skin of in the time that we have together. Because I think we stand at a very unique moment. And I've said that many times over my career, but we've never had such a governmental agenda that speaks to why we exist, what the purpose of us is. And I think that we have got a unique moment to drive that home. And the magic of this moment is that because the college has led such intelligent and thoughtful work over many, many years, we have got a really firm basis for the speech and language therapy profession to really capitalise upon this moment. And I see the college having worked so hard. The challenge for us now is, as a community together, not relying on the college to do it on their own. We do it together as a social movement across the profession, because we are bound by one purpose, which is to ensure that the population has access to the incredible skills that you have got that no one understands. Let's face it. I know the clues in the name, but no one really knows what we do. And it's not until their loved one has either a need for or has received the exquisite services of one of you that people really understand the opportunity. The tragedy is memory is short and they move on to do something different. But there's a real issue for us in how we carry that message, working with those allies who have seen the true benefit of our services. And the reason I say the college is really punching above its weight is because we've seen some really important pieces of work take shape. We've been working together over the last 3-4 years. Kamini before and Steve now as Chief Executive led some incredibly brilliant bits of thinking. The work you've done around vacancy rates and around understanding the workforce challenge was absolutely instrumental in supporting government to step into the space alongside the profession to really think with the Department for Education and the Department of Health and Social Care, what does it mean for the speech and language therapy profession? What is it about the challenges we face with the waiting times of now that we can actually do something about, not just as a knee-jerk today, but long-term and into the future? And the conversations that we are playing through with many of your colleagues in that situation, in those conversations, are really the conversations we've wanted for years. But we're now talking about how do we really think about how we expose colleagues as learners into the education system, bring people up in a way where they see education as much as health as their destiny for their future career, and really maximise support roles and how we support teachers and the wider community in schools, and of course parents and those carers wrapped around children. So there's some really interesting conversations playing through. The work you've done to embed dysphagia into the pre-registration curriculum is fantastic. We were worried that it was going to be a hard and difficult job, and you are moving with it and you are making progress with it in a way that is just brilliant. We've got to do it. We have got to keep modernising the profession to A, stay relevant, B, stay affordable and sustainable, but C, most importantly, to offer service users that holistic set of skills and to continue to evolve and modernise the profession. So Steve and Judith Walsh's with us and the wider team have really done some brilliant work. And I know you know that, but it's so easy to challenge our professional bodies for not trying hard enough. And what you've got is an exquisite crew of paid staff, which is a microscopic number of people for the work needing to be done, but also all of you as volunteers and members and engaged people driving the cause. It is an incredible piece of work that you do as a community together, working across your specialist interest groups and beyond. Your leadership programme that you have recently kick-started. And I think all of those things play together because this is a moment where we can drive home the ambition that we have with and for our populations. And the gloves are off. If you don't do it as a community, no one else is going to do it. We're going to have to do this together and drive it and enable the activation of others to be able to come on the journey with us. And over the years, you've done that spectacularly with commissioners and others. And with all the changes in healthcare, there's probably some areas where in the past we did brilliant stuff that we've lost sight of, we need to rethink. And there's also new and different things that we need to be thinking through. And with the government 3 shifts at the moment of digital, prevention and community, that plays absolutely to where you are. The challenges for us is how we enable people to really pay attention to your contribution in that space. So prevention historically has become a very medicalised thing of preventing heart disease, stopping people smoking. That's not prevention to the wider economy, the wider world, the world of economic growth, government missions of creating a sustainable health and care system. Prevention is that child aged 6 months being able to communicate as they need to with their family group. It's that child age 3 being able to communicate in their nursery school setting. It's that child as they hit school age being able to engage in building relationships and building their beginning to engage in the national curriculum. That's prevention. That's upstream work. It's how do we really start to help people understand that quality, safety and harm agenda and that inequalities are born out of not getting services right in those places. And I only pick on schools and children because it's a very candid model. It's the same when you think about the interventions that you could have in cancer pathways, ENT pathways, really upstream in a waiting time that enables somebody to get the expertise they need at that earlier point in their care pathway, rather than waiting for 18 months before the consultant says, that's great, hello, Mrs. Jones, lovely to see you. Actually, you need the expertise of a speech and language therapist here. We could have done that potentially 17 months earlier and supported that person to, stay confident, stay in work, stay, not concerned about what their diagnosis might be, because you could have done that far earlier in that pathway, thereby freeing up space for the people who really did need to see that consultant because that is their skill set. You've been able to do what is your skill set. So this is modern and evolving speech and language therapy. And you'll all laugh at me and say, yeah, Beverly, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. We've been doing this for decades. I know. But we are at a moment of governmental energy and shift where we need to be able to articulate the things we do now, the things we could do more of in the future, and what future services could really look like through the lens of the language of now. And the language of now is those 3 shifts. And areas like digital, where you will have tried many times, I imagine, to get somebody to develop the app that you can see could really start to drive change in how you relate to your community, how they might practice skills they need to do. These are times you need to revisit those conversations, revisit things on the market and start to be expectant. We always feel the second-class citizen. And I think the time has come to rebel and say to you, well, do you know what? It's no good anymore. It's no longer good enough that we are the second-class citizen. We're the 3rd largest workforce. All of your loved ones in the population rely on our core skills. We've now got to step into the space of starting to really level this up. So a little bit more expectant, still with joy and with love and with compassion, but absolutely articulating it through the lens of the impact on the community. And I know we do it. I know we know it. But I think we keep going again and try the real drive behind enabling people to utilise the moment to rethink some of the stories they tell themselves that makes it okay not to pay attention to what we do and what our professions can offer. So one of the other reasons why I think we're at an incredibly important part of our journey is that we have never had a better supply of speech and language therapists coming through. We have got an incredibly healthy supply pipeline, which is glorious and wonderful. but we need to do several things. We need brilliant clinical placements for them. We still need to think about apprentices because we need to be thinking about rural, coastal community and underserved areas. We want to think about how we embrace a representative workforce of our local areas so that we can engage in language and culture relative to the people with whom we work. And we want to think about widening participation pathways for people into our professions. So alongside a healthy supply, we still need to develop and drive apprenticeships where that is the right workforce solution. And we need to think about schools. And I really want us to start thinking differently. And there's some brilliant areas happening across England where you are embracing quite fundamentally different models of apprenticeships coming in through schools, working alongside health, sharing placements across each environment, enabling teaching assistants or teachers or others in that space, parents in those schools, to engage in the profession and step into the profession. Now, that is incredibly exciting because that starts to rebalance the playing field across our professions, to be able to really think through how we can then start to draw in from all aspects of our community. Incredibly exciting. But in the education space too, I don't want you to forget your fabulous educators in universities. They are such important people. They are the unicorns of our workforce. We don't have enough, and we need to be loving them and nurturing them. You need to be thinking about how your teams can participate and support, but also how we don't lose sight of the really important anchors of your profession, the linguistics training, the things that make you what you are. And it's how we create a real modern and evolving profession, yet we don't dilute the core skills of what make you special. So we've really got to think through over time how we support everybody across the sector to engage in what you think, and I would never tell you what that is because I wouldn't know, but what you think modern speech and language therapy needs to look like and where we pay attention. And in service, we've done a lot of work with chief AHPs looking at the quality, safety and harm agenda. And one key thing that I need the profession to really grapple with is an articulation of what it means not to have speech and language therapy available in the services in which you work. If you're in a mental health service, forensic service, if you're working in older people's care, or if you're working in neonates, we've got to be able to articulate, A, the impact you have, but also the opportunity cost of you not being there, but also the quality, safety and harm impact of you not being there. Quality and safety and harm agendas have become obsessed with falls and pressure ulcers. Where's the attention to the things that impact your workforce around the quality and safety harm agenda? How do you start to put a narrative to that? And how does a college work alongside you to start to give voice to that very clearly thought through narrative? You then start to articulate the quality, safety and harm agenda, which is incredibly important. And you have to help people understand it because often people don't understand it until they've been part of it. Swallowing is a much easier way to make the quality, safety and harm agenda than a kid not getting speech therapy age 7 in a school, wondering they may turn up in the criminal justice system in years to come. That's a much harder case to make. Equally important, it just looks different. It needs a strong and different narrative around it. So incredibly important that we think about the quality, safety and harm piece involving inequalities as much as morbidity and mortality. And alongside that comes the need then in services to really grapple with job planning, and job planning that has got in its capacity the time to teach, the time to bring on the next generation, not just 175% clinical activity. We've got to think through in the round how as a service you deliver the requirements across your service. But it is that job planning that then allows us to then start to move into the conversations around capacity and demand mapping for your services, and in the wider context of the workforce planning for your services as you start to think about how you can manage different waiting time problems, different areas around how you use your workforce. So incredibly important that alongside the professional advocacy, we're doing the good due diligence on how we drive services. And that means that then when your leaders are reporting to board or when your leaders are reporting up their managerial chains, they can have really factual, unemotional conversations about the workforce rather than what would have happened in the past potentially is we've got information and data, but it becomes an emotional quest rather than a very sanguine piece of we have got this much time. How do we prioritise this much time? And if you want more, that's lovely. But then how do we then move through the ability to change our skill mix or our workforce or our investment or our commissioning model, whatever it may be, to meet the core requirements that you need of service? There may be a digital element to that. There may be other areas where you could change pathways, but that is the conversation that many of you are absolutely deep into the weeds of currently. So when you start thinking about that's where the college's clinical specialty groups comes into its own, because speech and language therapy is a very, very broad church of expertise. And I really would encourage the clinical specialty areas to spend some time really trying to work alongside the college to get those narratives right, but so that it's not a big sludge speech and language therapy piece, but it's something exquisite to forensic mental health or whatever it might be, so that you're able to articulate, as I say, the opportunity and the opportunity cost of you not being there. And every area in which you work is important. That goes without saying, because a contribution you make is invaluable. But there are some key areas where I would urge you to pay some specific and earlier attention. One would be in the justice sector and in your ability to support the justice sector with resettlement after a period of after a custodial, I can't speak, custodial period. How you would support the justice sector with people who are offending much earlier in their journey and the speech and language therapy content of that. And again, you're highly active in that space, but you need an absolutely watertight narrative in that space. And then to be communicating that to the Department of Justice and others as part of integrated solutions alongside occupational therapy, other professions, around how you could really start to drive some change in getting to the root cause of some of the challenges for some of our populations. I want you to really think about the SEND and CYP agenda. I know you are deep into that conversation currently, but the opportunity and the transformational opportunity of thinking around support workforce, parent advocates, other areas of how you could work, building on the best practice that you are driving in parts of the country already. This is a real moment where the more you get together as a group and pinch with pride each other's genius, the quicker you will scale, the quicker you will be able to really motor with so many aspects of the amazing work that we are seeing going on around the country. And I know we're all a bit tired. I know all our jobs are at risk. I know all of that. We're all in the same boat. But what we do is worth fighting for. And I would just say to you, this really is a useful point for us to come together, recharge, re-energize, and give it another go, people, because this is why we exist. This is why we do the jobs we do, is because we care. The other huge area of impact where I think there's massive opportunity for service change is around the autism diagnosis pathway for people. And I would really encourage conversations with the college. We're happy to join and connect partners across about how speech and language therapists, alongside other AHP colleagues, could be fundamentally engaged in those diagnostic pathways to speed access, but most importantly, speed access to diagnosis, but also therapeutic intervention, support and care. And I really do want us to think differently about accepting some of the challenges we've got at the moment, and how we come together as a cross-professional community to really think through and drive some change. We've talked about cancer pathways, ENT pathways, and your incredible opportunity to impact there, enabling people to get the right care from the right person. So important. And there is an absolute need for the researchers on the call and the academics on the call who have students doing MScs and BScs. We have got to box clever around how we do the economic return on investment, explorative work that starts to show the impact of what you do. It is no longer good enough to say you have to have us because we are life-changing. People will pat you on the head and say, that's lovely, Beverly, thank you very much indeed, give me your evidence. And we don't have all the evidence that we want. No other profession does. But as we're always second through the gate, the real challenge for us is people expect a higher level of evidence from us. And there's a challenge for us around how, as a community, we really do drive that. And I would urge you to think long-term in some of that work. Please don't think that just the impact that you have now and the poster on the wall is enough. It's the work you've done now, the poster on the wall, moving to a publication, building on the poster, how we build momentum. Then it's how you match with your colleagues around the country doing the similar work to yourselves, and then with global partners to really start to amplify your research and get the answers to the questions that will drive fundamental shifts for people in the services that are commissioned. And then I want you to think about how do we then really start to make the long-term economic analysis that shows impact. So my question is, speech and language therapy in neonates makes complete and utter sense. Can't believe we aren't doing it in every single neonatal department across the entire country, if not the world. But we're going to have to show the impact of that somehow, somewhere, in a highly complex space on long-term outcomes for people. We're going to need to think about the impact of speech and language therapy age 3.5. Does that impact on the long-term outcome of that person? We don't know. We can't show that in a level of RCT beauty. but we're going to have to think through really clever methodology to look at either modelling outcomes or doing something. I'll leave that with the very clever researchers of you out there. But we've got to grapple with it because it's going to get harder, not easier. And the impact you have is so fundamentally important that we have got to grapple with this and get it right. The other area where I would really ask that we go back round the curve and spend some quality time with a bit of compassion and a bit of love is our ICB colleagues who are moving back into a very strategic commissioning space. They've clearly been in that space before, but it's now coming absolutely to the fore in the context of neighbourhood and various different forms of contracting across neighbourhood, is thinking through how we work with our commissioning colleagues to really, as many of you have done for decades, but bring service user voice into the equation, bring the voice of parents into the equation, to really help to remind our commissioners how we need to commission services that are relevant. And I know you do this all the time, I get it. But for those of you who aren't, we need to. Those of you who are, how can you support those who aren't? And those of you who are, how can we do it better and in a more collegiate way, thinking about the opportunity of neighbourhood, where we could actually start to think far more tactically about what the community assets could do as part of a more developed commissioning model and how we might work more cleverly, that's not really good English, but across a whole system, not in isolated pockets of commissioning as many of us have had to work in the past. So I really would ask you just to think through, and this is not a list of demands, this is actually me being excited by the moment and the opportunity of the moment, and how as a team we can start to help people understand. And there's a bit for us about painting the picture of things that people can't understand. Those waiting lists didn't happen by chance. Those waiting lists didn't happen because no one was trying. Those waiting lists have happened because no one quite gets it. We've got to think through how we paint the picture. And the way we paint the picture is through data and stories and data. And that's how we paint the picture for people. And it is those human lived experience stories that absolutely grab people by the solar plexus. But if we can't back it up with the data, we know that people then can't quite fathom it. And it just feels nice to have, or gosh, isn't that unlucky? Poor them. Wouldn't be the same for us. It's got to be data driven. And if we can then take that data to then cost on society, DWP payments, Department of Work and Pensions payments, so benefits, the challenges of people being either out of work or in the criminal justice, there's a whole piece, or just not fulfilling their potential, that we've got to grapple as a community. And we've got colleagues across the globe desperate to get into some of those conversations. So we've talked through a lot of things. I really do want you to think about digital shopping lists, about what is it that speech and language therapy needs to do, is doing, could do, wants to do around the embracing of digital as being a genuine help and support in those patient pathways. I want you to think about how we can really start to motor as a community to do more together and learn better from each other, and to really think through how we paint those pictures through data and stories. But the most important thing to say is that the work that you do is so incredibly important, and that NHS provision free at the point of need for people, the fantastic private sector workers that we've got as part of our community here who are offering fantastic and vital involvement in people's lives and services, our educators, our researchers, and others working in community settings, through charities, whatever you do, however you embrace the speech and language therapy profession, your contribution matters. It is so important. But working together with no artificial barriers, no ego, no conflict is the only way that you are going to ensure that you are able to offer the sheer brilliance of what you do, channeled with and through a fantastic professional body with a great executive team and a really, really fantastic future ahead. But you do it together, united as a community, and drive home with populations the sheer brilliance of what you do. So thank you. It's a joy and an honour to be here. And let me have the questions, Helen.
Thank you so much, Beverly. That was thought-provoking and inspirational, and has clearly had a very significant impact on the audience because we have upwards of 30 questions for you.
Fantastic. Just remind them I have no money and I'd love to, but I can't.
So we have just about 20 minutes left to answer questions. So as I said, we're not going to get through them all, but perhaps you might be able to get to the ones that we don't get through today outside of the session. So let's start with a question from Claire Moser, who asks, what is your main tip for us to increase visibility and representation of SLT across all our sectors and settings?
I think, to be honest, Claire, I think it's service user voice. And I think it is the most important things that people listen to comes from the voice of others, not from the voice of self. And this is where professional bodies get really stuck, because the professional bodies do great advocacy, but people go, you're the professional body, of course you're going to say that. So it's how do we liberate the voices of others? So for me, it is going to be articulate patients. That's a tricky one for some speech. You know what I mean. Fantastic people and loved ones who have experienced the brilliance of your services. How do you liberate them to tell the world, and how important them telling the world is to educate people? I got stopped by my chief executive one day in the corridor, having spent years trying to persuade him to do things for speech and language therapists and other professions. And he said to me just the day before he retired, my mum's just had the most fantastic speech and language therapist. She's gone from not communicating to being able to communicate. I can't tell you how life-changing that is. So I thanked him profoundly for that statement and wondered why he didn't know that for the last 20 years he's managed our services. So how can you then ask those patients to teach other people? Why can't those patients come to board and do that patient lived experience story for that first, session when they all have their lived experience story? Why can't we have AHP voices, either in the written word or the videoed word, or heaven forbid, in person? How can we get people talking for us? How can you, where you've got patient relatives who are GPs or who are other medics or nurses or others, how do you say to them, how can we really start to get others to understand what we do? How can they help spread the word? It sounds ridiculous, but the more public education we can do, the better. You may have waiting areas where you have videos, you may have newsletters that go out from your organisations, whatever you can do that teaches people about what it is you do, but in really accessible language. Again, I don't need to tell you that, but that tells a story that matters to people. We've just got to do it, and it's everybody's duty, I think, is to educate people constantly on the magic of what we do. Not in a whingy, don't forget us, we're so important, nobody cares about us, but in a really engaging, wonderful way related to what matters to those people about how we can contribute. It is boring, it is exhausting, there is a level of moral injury to keep doing it, believe me, I know that. It's worth it, because actually if you change one person's life because of it, either as a career or as a patient, we've really done our reason for being on the planet. So stick with it, it's worth it.
Thanks, Beverly. Jennifer Heath would like to know, how do we work to retain more staff? Can we develop career progression beyond Band 7, especially in paediatric workforces, and how can we push this agenda?
So I've just been listening to the Health Select Committee, where we had got 4 of our professional bodies presenting to the Health Select Committee yesterday in Parliament. It's on the Parliament Live website if anybody who's interested. And career progression is absolutely key. We are highly intelligent, highly skilled people, and we want to be able to have a career progression. And for some people, that might go up towards the higher echelons banding grades. For others of us, it may take us sideways, and we may have times of our lives where we go sideways, we go up. My colleague Carrie calls it the squiggly careers of the average human being. And we see that across other professions. It's not just us. And it depends where you are and what's right for you. So the first thing for me is, how do we give voice to the squiggly career that takes you sideways? How do we help making sure that people understand the research, the education, the quality improvement, all the different directions that take us out from out sideways in our careers? And the best allied health professionals often are the ones who are out doing something completely different to allied health, but as sleeper agents out in those environments, helping people in those environments begin, as Claire said earlier, to understand what we do. So don't think that leaving allied health is a crime. It isn't. It just takes your genius elsewhere and helps you spread the word. And the best AHP leaders are those who've been out and done something else and come back in again later on, bringing the intelligence of the outside world into our sometimes more narrow community. So it's really starting to give life to the sideways career moves. And then thinking about the career moves that take you up through the bandings. We've just done some brilliant work with the college and with the college votees, looking at advanced practice through a social model of care lens, because we're very, very aware. And the reason I got involved in all the advanced practice work was because I could feel it being subsumed into the biomedical model, which for some of us, fantastic. For those of you working in cancer pathways, you may say, well, actually, of course, Beverly, that's where I need to be. But for those of you working in schools or in other settings, it means nothing to how you need to work with your communities. So that work now needs to start to take some shape. And that's where working with educators across speech and language therapy programs, occupational therapy programs and others, we need to start thinking about where in the country can we position an advanced practice program that drives a fundamentally different model of care, where we can then start to develop some expertise around school and young people, some expertise around chronic disability, whatever it might be, and start to rethink the perhaps narrow mindset of where advanced practice runs the risk of getting itself stuck, and start to blow the lid on it. It's going to be us that makes that happen. When it comes to the jobs being available, I'd argue there's several bits to that. One is how we support speech and language therapy managers and AHP leaders to be as creative as possible with every penny they've got available to their services. And then as we start to think about neighbourhood and how we move into neighbourhood, I would argue that thinking advanced and consultant practice roles as part of neighbourhood developments as you move staff around and think about how teams are going to work becomes a really vital part of making sure we don't have concrete ceilings. And hearing Karen Poole talk this morning on the Health Select Committee of yesterday, the work they've done in East Sussex, where she is, of moving their rehab services out into the community, what they did is use that opportunity to create some more senior roles, which gave greater job opportunity for highly established, brilliant clinicians to really start to develop. So I think we think about it hand in glove with innovation as part of our retention. And if we have got good senior leadership roles, we're going to be able to bring in and retain more band 5 and more junior staff, because they can see A, hope that there's something ahead, but B, there are people to supervise them, grow them, stretch them, and develop them in what are incredibly complex roles. So I think it's a multi-pronged attack, but that's again where we pinch with pride from each other and start to drive momentum, and a little bit of fear of missing out, a little point across to the trust 4 doors down, which is doing something really sassy, and you're not. Let them do it, take the risk and prove it, and then make your managers feel they really are not delivering and missing out because they haven't got one, and then help create that momentum. But it's how we do it together. There's no room for internal professional challenges. We do it together as a community. So if you want one of those jobs in your teams, support your manager. Don't bash your manager for not having one. Support your manager to think creatively about how you might create one. So we put all our energy into moving the profession and the care for patients forwards, not fighting each other. Life's way too short for that.
Thanks, Beverly. Thank you. Moving on now to a question from Anne Main. And Anne asks, do you feel that the increase in private practice as NHS services face challenges is having a negative impact on the visibility of SLT on the broader healthcare and educational landscape?
Wow, brilliant question. I think if I understood the question right, my answer is no. I think that I don't. So obviously I'm paid to promote and to develop and love the NHS workforce, but my mission on life is to love, support and promote the workforce, because everybody offers a different and vital contribution across the workforce. And I tell you, in some of the school-based stuff, we are utterly dependent on private practitioners as paid for by the state, but coming into those schools to deliver exceptional care alongside other trusts where you may have NHS services into those schools. And again, I don't know, but I imagine it's the same across some of the other sectors, maybe prison services, whatever. I don't know. All I know is that without a mixed economy of speech and language therapists, A, I wouldn't retain the brilliance of the people that we need to retain. B, we wouldn't be able to deliver the staffing. And I think in the future, we'll use more and more of those hybrid models rather than less and less of them, because I imagine we'll have to, especially in places like rural and coastal underserved communities. But I also know that our private sector colleagues have done some startling and brilliantly work, and our charity sector colleagues, around student placements. Many of them lecture in universities. I think what I would really, if I ruled the world and it was rules by Beverly, what I would really love more than anything was, particularly in some of those rural and coastal and more challenged communities, to see some of our private practitioners, and I know many of you do this, but also doing sessional time back in the other NHS teams too. So you do your private practice piece exquisitely and brilliantly, but you're also linked into the NHS team. And the reason why that matters to me is because it means that we've then got some connectivity across a place between private and health and NHS. It means that we've got your brilliant skills as private sector practitioners being nestled, offering some supervisory support and content into the smaller NHS teams, perhaps. But it just means that as far as patients go, often we're handing them between each other sometimes. So it just gives us a continuity and a bigger critical mass of passionate speech and language therapists to drive change. And please don't compete. Believe me, there's enough work for everybody. What we need you to do is be the best yous together across a place in partnership, not in competition. And I think if we could pull that off, then we get somewhere really exciting. And I think that then starts to enable us to think quite creatively about the future. appreciating that is only if I ruled the world, but I do think it's something worth striving for. And we achieve that by learning together, working together, and again, working as one community. There's so few of you. Every single one of you matters, being part of an absolutely brilliant movement to ensure that people have access to your care.
Thank you, Beverly. Alison Eggett asked a very, very similar question. I feel you've answered it just now. So we'll skip Alison's question and move on to a question from Laura. Laura Whittle asks, how can independent therapy practices encourage the NHS workforce to see us colleagues as not a competing service? We can complement and support the broader issues of lack of service capacity if we see each other as equals.
I think the challenge is that we're human beings, and I think that's probably our greatest asset and one of our greatest challenges. And I did in the spirit of of honesty and friendship. I think that the challenge is people, history, life, and pressure. And I think we all look at each other, often with a bit of envy, thinking, oh my gosh, it looks so much better over there. You look at the NHS, think, gosh, you've got paid holiday, you've got sick pay, maternity pay, and you've got all these, you've got a lovely mixed caseload over here. And the NHS looks at the private sector and thinks, oh my gosh, you've got a lovely environment to work in, and you've got lovely patients, and you're earning £5,000 a nanosecond more than I am. And gosh, this is all. We all look at that in a competitive lens. And I think the challenge for us all is if we can step back from that and see ourselves as humans and co-conspirators in liberating the brilliance of speech and language therapy for population, it changes the dynamic. We're still humans, we still will have history, and we still will be flawed individuals. But if we come together around shared purpose, around optimizing, and we don't do things that get in each other's way. I used to manage a fantastic inpatient service where we hadn't got enough resource or anything. And we had a fantastic private sector set up, and we'd spend most of our times fighting each other because our patients felt that they were getting a substandard service, or they felt that they shouldn't have to pay or whatever. And we tried to help them understand that actually we could work collegiately together to create enough capacity for everybody. But so many things got in the way of that relationship. And I think we've got to be really mindful that we have to support patients not to get caught up in any kind of scrap between private and NHS provision. We've got to help patients to behave, patients, service users, whatever we refer to those incredible humans we work with as. But we've got to think about how we wrap around them in support, and they don't become something that gets weaponized across systems that are not coping. So it's just adult conversation. And it's about, again, shared purpose. Why are we here? We're here to serve the population and to use all of our assets well. And how can we do that? And that means we need to spend time together as leaders in the private practice and in the NHS to work together and build those relationships, build trust, and then not let each other down by dishing the other or whatever. Bearing in mind that some of you are going to be competing, but I believe you can work in a competitive environment and still be respectful and valuing of the bigger purpose that you share. Does that make any sense, Helen? I think we just
absolutely it does.
It does. First that we serve. That's not much to ask.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Beverly. Very well answered. Okay, we've just got 5 minutes or so left, so maybe time for one or two more questions. So the next one comes from Lara Thomas, who asks, what strategies can help SLTs balance growing demand with workforce wellbeing, ensuring sustainable practice while meeting future healthcare priorities?
Brilliant question. Boy, it's hard, I think, would be my short answer to that question. But this is where I think job planning, and I'd never thought in my whole life my life would become about thinking that job planning was the answer. But in this context, I believe it is, because all of us, when we're working clinically, carry the weight of the whole patient population on our shoulders because we care. And that is an exhausting place to be. And the beauty of job planning is it changes the narrative to one of, this is just me, I'm Beverly, I'm human. I'm through professional judgment, done in a really supportive way with our teams, is I know that I can see X number of patients and I can't see everybody on the list. The minute I share that responsibility with my manager, my leader, it's slightly less of a weight to carry. If in that job plan we realise that everybody's human and doing 175% of clinical activity is not possible, and that we have to understand that at some point I have to train the next generation, or at some point everybody just needs to stop and breathe and catch up on something. It might be the paperwork that you have to do, the reports you have to write. It might be the quality improvement project that you've always said that you would do. Every IPR for the last 47 years has said you're going to do this quality improvement project. You've never had a chance to do it. It's how do we create really sensible and integrous job plans that realise that we are people and not machines? And clearly we're here to deliver a service, so it's not going to have you resting for hours of a day, just sort of pontificating about life. You've got to be there doing and delivering against the agenda of the workplace. But the job plan takes into account that. So you have moments in your week where actually you can breathe and you feel you're allowed to breathe. You're not betraying your patients because you aren't seeing them. And it's how we lift that moral injury that we all feel into a space where we can hold it for and with people. And then everybody knows they're doing their fair share of the work, they're taking their fair share of the patients, and of the workload and of the learners, and it just feels that we are more transparent. It stops the background story of nobody works as hard as I do or I never get a break. It makes it into a much more adult and transparent environment. And I think that begins to change the narrative from emotion to fact, and then we can again breathe out and hopefully look after each other.
Indeed, absolutely. Thanks, Beverly. I think we've got time for one final question just for in 2 minutes. So Ali Wright wants to know if you have any advice on how we can work with our ICBs to highlight the importance of SLT roles and services to maintain and develop the workforce.
So our dear ICB colleagues are having a really tricky time at the moment. And I think the first thing is where you do have either allied health professionals in those roles, or you have got commissioners who commission speech and language therapy services, whatever your specialty in those roles, reach out and give them some love at the moment would be my first ask of you, because they're having a really, really difficult time. I know many of you are, I know we are, but they're also having a really difficult time. And we do tend to bash commissioners or the sandwich filling in any hierarchy structures. So love them is the first thing. Once they settle on the other side of the horrors of the moment, there is a bit that says you'll find that people are going to land in different roles potentially. So where you may have had a relationship with a commissioner previously, that may not be them. They will have to change and develop their skill sets relative to what their portfolio will look like, and they will all be learning a new world of neighbourhood. So even if you had a really good commissioning setup beforehand, there's every chance there will be energy and desire to think differently and to change. My suggestion to you would be to be absolutely engaged with ICB colleagues wherever you have those links, to find out, as soon as they land and they can breathe and their VR process, their voluntary redundancy processes have finished and people start to then sort out their jobs. And then at that point you pounce with love and you make a relationship with those commissioners who will be looking after the services that you lead. And I would suggest that where you can, if you can, you meet people face to face personally to build a human relationship with these people. And you go alongside them in the spirit of collaboration and support to try and help them optimize the things that they are looking to commission. You make sure that you are absolutely briefed on what the issues are in your environment, what the worries are, what the waiting times might be, where the service challenges are, where the service gaps are. And you offer to meet this commissioner to have a wide-ranging conversation about the art of the possible of the moment. This is again where all of you working as a community behind the scenes to share notes, to have you may have a lead speech and language therapist network that looks at commissioning relationships, and you just all share on their WhatsApp group what you're doing so you can embolden each other. And you go and you sit alongside that commissioner with love and you help them to work it through. You might get chewed up and spat out by half of them. The other half might extend the hand of friendship. Who knows what the response will be? But the starting point should always be working alongside somebody with love to help them to absolutely maximize the moment. And that's where your data and stories and data is vital, so that you can start to illustrate for people the gaps, the lost opportunity, the impact, whatever it may be. And if you've done your job planning, you've got your demand and your capacity mapping, you're having a factual conversation with somebody. You're not flapping around like a dead kipper saying, it's awful, I haven't got enough people, it's terrible, I need something. Saying, no, look, these services are great, we're motoring, but you could really help us by doing X, Y, or Z. These services, look, here's our demand, here's our capacity, it's not working. We've done these things. I've brought support workforce in here, I've got an apprentice in here, I'm carrying no vacancies because I've done my job planning, but I still can't service the needs of this community. But if we did this, we could.
Absolutely.
I mean, goodness me, that's the relationship.
Thank you, Beverly. Sorry to stop you there, but we are coming to the end of the session. What a fantastic conversation that was. And as I say, there are upwards of 20 more questions there waiting for you if you do get a chance to get around to them after the session. So thank you, Beverly. for that. And just as we finish, can I remind everybody that this session and all sessions have been recorded and are available to watch after the event, and you can find the recordings on the videos tab, and they'll stay on the platform for up to 6 months after the event. And after attending live sessions, please leave feedback for speakers and the organisers in the feedback tab found on the right hand side. And not only is this invaluable for future event planning, but you'll also earn points in the Challenge Hub. So we're now sharing a code which you can enter into the Challenge Hub, and the more sessions you attend, the more points you'll earn. So feel free to make a note of that code now. And we now have 45 minutes for lunch, and we'll be running drop-ins during lunch from 12:15 to 12:40. So please do pop in with any questions you might have for our colleagues or our sponsors and exhibitors. And these drop-ins can only hold up to 50 people at one time. So please do join early as possible if you are interested in attending. Thank you very much, everybody.